What's up? Welcome back to Convo Blueprint, the stream. I'm your host, Zion. I got a new microphone. And actually, before I do anything, I always start stuff. Okay, yeah, I did select this microphone. So hopefully it sounds good. Um, yeah, because for some reason, I ain't been getting my sound right. But hopefully this sounds good. And I don't have my phone to check if it's echoing. So I'm just gonna roll with it. Um, But actually, I'm not going to do that because there's a gain knob on it, and I don't know if my sound is playing. So let me try to go check real quick. Let me go to my stream. I should have my phone with me, and then I wouldn't have this problem, huh? Let's check it. Okay, it looks like it's working. I can hear myself. Okay, it looks like it's working. Okay, cool. So, welcome to the stream. And if you know anything about what was going on today, you saw the Trump White House aide, Cassidy Hutchinson, who was repeatedly privy to some of the most incriminating parts of the insurrection, provided stunning, damning details on former President Donald Trump's attempted coup. Testifying before the January 6th committee, Hutchinson spoke directly to Trump's state of mind and criminal culpability and presented what is perhaps the most incriminating evidence against Trump yet. MSNBC's chief legal correspondent, Ari Melber, is joined by former Watergate prosecutor Nick Akerman and New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg to discuss the bombshell revelations and what this means for Trump. So let's see what they got to say. First of all, let me just ask you all, do you think that former President Trump is going to be indicted based on the events that happened on January 6th when hashtag storm the Capitol actually happened? Do you think that there will be indictments or former President Trump will be charged? Or do you think he'll be allowed to run for president again? Let me know what you think in the comments. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll get right into it. But actually, before I do that, I feel like, we always got to start off with the word because I'm a believer of the Most High. And I feel like we got to start off with the word. So let me bring this up here. This morning, my mic. Let me fix my mic. This morning, or today rather, my focus was on Titus chapter 2. Let's get some reading in. Reading is fundamental. Not enough people do it, and not enough people actually read the scriptures. A lot of people say they believe, but they don't actually read the scriptures. So let's read it. Here we go. I'll make it a little bigger for you. This is the ESV version. It's pretty easy to understand. Okay, that looks good. And it reads, "But as for you, teach what accords with sound doctrine. Older men are to be sober." Okay, let me fix. There we go. Older men are to be sober-minded, dignified, self-controlled, sound in faith, in love, and in steadfastness. Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of the Most High may not be reviled. Likewise, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. Show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity, dignity, and sound speech that cannot be condemned, so that an opponent may be put to shame, having nothing evil to say about us. Bondservants are to be submissive to their own masters in everything. They are to be well-pleasing, not argumentative, not pilfering, but showing all good faith, so that in everything they may adorn the doctrine of the Most High, our Savior. For the grace of the Most High has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age, waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify himself a people for his own possession, who are zealous for good works. Declaring these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one disregard you. I like that. That was my morning meditation. So, let's get into it.
We're going to show you a crucial extended excerpt of this newly revealed testimony by Trump White House aide, Cassidy Hutchinson, who was repeatedly in the room or at the door during some of the most pivotal and incriminating parts of the now infamous insurrection. And she drew on that front row seat to provide new, damning details of the attempted coup. Today, this was the 6th insurrection hearing, and we try to cover them precisely for you. We reported on how the first hearing detailed violent crimes by many, though sometimes without clear causal links to Trump. Another hearing showed the criminal liability of Trump appointees and lawyers, raising questions about Donald Trump's own role. Other hearings featured Republicans from Pence's office and from the state level. And on this program, we reported on how some parts of some of those hearings did fall short. Those hearings all had, in their own way, very important material, but not every hearing has been a blockbuster when it comes to evidence on the former president.
So that's what makes this one a little bit, a little bit stronger, because this was someone who's well connected. This is somebody who was a White House aide, and her testimony carries weight based on that.
Today's hearing delivered the blockbuster evidence, smoking gun, firsthand accounts on both Trump's corrupt state of mind and overt acts to advance violence and that attempted coup. Let me just repeat that reporting up front. Proving a crime requires proving the state of mind and overt action. Today's hearing featured a loyal Trump aide's firsthand eyewitness testimony on Trump's state of mind and actions. Hutchinson testifying Trump knew those supporters that he had summoned were armed. He said so. He expected their violence and basically said, in closed company, but overheard in a manner that's now been delivered under oath, he said that would be fine because that violence, if it commenced, would be directed at others, not him. Hutchinson testifying Trump tried to order the Secret Service to admit armed supporters into his crowd where then they could go to the Capitol, a likely illegal order to help armed rioters who would then criminally trespass and criminally attack police and try to do much, much worse against the United States government. That is new today. That is evidence under oath from a Trump loyalist that Donald Trump abused his power over the government and the Secret Service and law enforcement to try to overthrow the government and get law enforcement injured or killed. Among other things, just imagine being in the Secret Service or law enforcement and hearing your commander-in-chief order the illegal admittance of armed people, including reports of AR-15s in the crowd, and we know what those can do, while you risk.
And I think that's the crazy part, that according to the witness, President Trump had no care or concern of anyone else's safety or any regard for anyone else, just that he knew that they wouldn't do harm to him, even though he knew he had tweeted these things about Mike Pence and that the crowd would respond to him. It's like he was reveling in the power that he had in that moment.
Your life and limb to protect.
And arguably still has.
That commander-in-chief. The testimony and now revealed White House documents show Trump intended to join them at the Capitol. He ordered the agents to take him to the Capitol. And before we turn to this excerpt that we are going to play for you, remember, these hearings, this possibly most consequential hearing today, these are not about what anyone thinks of Donald Trump. And they're not about what you guesstimate seems obvious about all of this and how it went down, even if we all pay attention and have our own ideas. This is a congressional investigative subpoena-backed process. It's already led to some indictments. This is the real thing. And so today, this hearing is about the actual evidence and record.
And even with the indictments that have already happened, it's amazing that people still believe that insurrection did not happen on January 6th. At this point, just to let everyone know, I'm politically agnostic. I'm not neither Democrat nor Republican. I am about truth and justice, and that's why I like to do this show and try to find and engage with you about the roots of the problems, and that how we're going to fix things is how we respond to things. So hopefully, I would like for President Trump to be indicted. He should be, based on his actions on January 6th, leading up to it. Hashtag storm the Capitol, which people actually did.
Which is new and damning, specifically regarding the former president.
This is Webflow Interactions, the only tool that brings all the animation power of CI.
We're looking at him saying, Rudy, could you explain what's happening on the 6th? We're going to the Capitol. It's going to be great. The president's going to be there. Mark said something to the effect of, there's a lot going on, Cass, but I don't know. Things might get real bad.
I recall Tony and I having a conversation with Mark, mentioning knives, guns in the form of pistols and rifles.
There's an individual in a tree. He's got blue jeans and a blue jean jacket, and underneath the blue jean jacket, the complainant's both saw stock with AR-15.
Bear spray, body armor, spears, and flagpoles.
Two of the individuals in that group at the base of the tree near the porta potty.
I mean, these people were ready for war. They were ready for war. They were armed up, body armored up.
They had Glock-style pistols in their waistband.
I got 3 men walking down the street in fatigue was carrying AR-15. Copy it.
And the thing that I've been talking about on the video yesterday about Roe v. Wade, and it's just the hypocrisy of it all. Like, the Law and Order Party stormed the Capitol because their presidential candidate didn't win. But they're the Law and Order Party, though.
14 for independent.
Have you talked to the president? And Tony said, yes, sir. He's aware too.
Was he told again in that conversation that people couldn't come through the mags because they had weapons?
Correct.
He was effing furious.
You know, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away. He felt the mags were at fault for not letting everybody in. He wanted it full, and he was angry that we weren't letting people through the mags with weapons.
Just to be clear, Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that the president wanted to take the mags away and said that the armed individuals were not there to hurt him?
That's a fair assessment. There were many discussions the morning of the 6th about the rhetoric.
And I wonder, okay, so as this is happening, it's enough for the president and Congress and them to be evacuated. I wonder, was this at the time when the Capitol was already breached? I don't remember if she said that or not, or if that question was asked.
Of the speech that day, fight for Trump. We're going to march to the Capitol. I'll be there with you. Fight for me. Fight for what we're doing. Fight for the movement.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
It was becoming clear to us and to the Secret Service that Capitol Police officers were getting overrun at the security barricades outside of the Capitol building.
Yep.
And they were short people.
Staff believed that Mogul, the president, was, quote, going to the Capitol.
We have a breach of the Capitol. Breach of the Capitol. We lost the line. We lost the line.
When President Trump left the ellipse stage at 1:10, the staff knew that rioters had invaded the inaugural stage.
See? Okay, so he had already known at this point. That's what makes this so damning.
I called Mr. Ornato to reconfirm that we weren't going to the Capitol. We were not going up to the Capitol.
We were not going up to the Capitol amidst the march, the breach, the violence against the officers. It was red alert level. And then the other part that is most significant today and most legally damning for Donald Trump, accused of crimes in office, is that when the agents refused his insistent, repeated request that he go join the armed protesters, who some of these agents had heard him say he wanted to be admitted armed so they could go do whatever it was they'd all planned to do together. The agents refused for Donald Trump, then President Trump's safety. We learned today the extent, absolutely extreme.
This is the crazy part. So he literally, according to this, he literally attacked the Secret Service agent, I believe it was. He's about to tell us.
Same extent that Trump acted. And keep in mind, if a different person inside the government did this, had physical contact, initiated a physical clash with an agent, they would not only be out of a job, they would be detained on the spot. Here's more of what we learned in the bombshell evidence against Donald Trump today.
Bobby had relayed to him, we don't have the assets to do it. It's not secure. We're going back to the West Wing. The president had very strong, very angry response to that. Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now. To which Bobby responded, sir, we have to go back to the West Wing. The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol. Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Ornato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
In other words, he went to choke him.
Our special coverage begins with former Watergate prosecutor Nick Akerman and the New York Times' Michelle Goldberg. Nick, what is the level of this testimony as criminal evidence?
It's pretty spot on. I mean, what we didn't know about before today, and we had a hunch, at least it was my hypothesis, that Trump knew 2 days before January 6th that Vice President Pence was not going to do his bidding. He was not going to send the electoral votes back to the states. He wasn't going to disregard them. So what it showed today was that Trump's final game plan was to use violence, was to stop the vote of the electoral count through violence.
Is this, I'm just pressing you on this for precision. In your mind, is this the first time we've had? I
wonder also, like, are the tweets seen as threatening? Or I know it gets sticky because, yes, there's a First Amendment right, and politicians are given latitude to say many things through the Constitution, but it does come a point to where when people are reacting off of what you're saying, I mean, it's like a Charles Manson effect, who didn't commit any murders, but he motivated other people to commit murders. So, I mean, he went to jail. I'm not saying President Trump is Charles Manson, just give an example about the First Amendment.
Had an eyewitness inside the Trump White House directly link him to encouraging armed violence.
That's right. Before, we had nobody, not forget inside the White House, we had no evidence linking Trump to the violence. Remember, at his second impeachment hearing, he was claiming that his statements at the ellipse were simply guaranteed by the First Amendment. He was trying to encourage his supporters who were disappointed in the fact that he lost the election.
And let's dig in on that. In fairness, there are politicians who say all kinds of things in speeches. The Supreme Court has actually given a wide berth for that. Right. And so at that impeachment, as you mentioned, that's what I'm referring to. Outside the White House, there are people who said they read that as directly incitement. Incitement is a crime. Other people said, well, that's a tough case to prove, or tie goes to the president. It wasn't incitement. Today, Nick, today you have the White House aide, loyal to Trump, in the room on site, detailing that when he was told people had weapons, he tried to further their access to then be on site with those weapons. And what do
That is what sounds criminal.
people do with weapons? Potentially use them.
That's right. What else were they doing with those weapons there? It's a whole different story. I mean, it'd be different if he was talking to.
Because see, look, the whole idea of storm the Capitol, if like the storm the Capitol was, so if we don't get what we want because there's election fraud. So the lies started early on, and then it was like storm the Capitol. So that was the incitement part. So that's the reason why having the weapons there creates this other, problematic response.
An aged group of people that were there on their walkers. That was not the situation. He knew that people had AR-15s, that they had Glocks, that they had other kinds of weapons, but yet he was using the language he did, which his own counsel, the counsel to the president, told him he should not use.
And before I bring in Michelle, just again to you as a prosecutor, would that be an illegal order?
Yes, it would be. I mean, I think what you've got now is a setup for a real thorough grand jury investigation.
And I wonder, like, okay, like what is going to happen? Like, what is going to be the outcome? Because we don't see our political officials conducting investigations and then like largely doing something about it. And this is unprecedented.
We know this happened. Now the question is,
the actions of January 6th, what happened that day is unprecedented.
Can you prove what's hearsay, what's admissible? But you've got people like Meadows who could be put into a grand jury, and if he refused to cooperate, the government can give him immunity. You've got lots of people that were privy to all of this, and you've got the makings of a real case against Donald Trump at this point.
And it's a matter of, are people going to use their political power like we have seen them many other times to stay out of trouble? Or, does that political power go away when, you violate your oath of responsibility, when you engage in corrupt practices that, cause Americans to put their life on the line? So what do y'all think? For the viewer, thanks for checking me out on Twitch. Let me know what you think in the comments regarding the testimony today when it comes to the White House aide. Does this change your mind? Do you think that President Trump should be indicted based on his actions and using his political office? Kind of like the Supreme Court, who said the football coach could do his prayers at the public school on the field at the 50-yard line, and how it was creating a situation where maybe people felt that they had to pray to play. It becomes the issue and a problem when you're a person in a position of public authority and power. So I don't know. I just find it interesting, and I think he should be indicted based on what happened. An investigation, a thorough investigation, should be conducted, and nobody should be able to plead the fifth based on the fact that they are serving in public office, and this is being conducted by the federal government. That's just my opinion. I'm like, which one do we want to look at? Okay, so I feel like that's enough about January 6th. Let's look at other stories of the day. Like this one right here.
The new best way to make money online that nobody's...
How close are we to a larger war? I feel like we're very close.
For enforcing sanctions on supplies to a Russian enclave, Kaliningrad.
Is your view that the best form of defense is offense?
We are not offensive country. We don't want to attack anybody. But of course, we understand very much those threats which are coming. And probably nobody could understand the threats from Russia better than we.
Is this a fight?
And I feel like, okay, this war did not have to happen, just like all wars. There failed negotiations, and I think that Ukraine is going to have to negotiate with Russia on territories. I think Henry Kissinger said that. I think President Joe Biden recently said that. So it's kind of like, why are the world leaders allowing people to die when they don't have to, when they're expecting people to die and fight for their country? But in the long run, Russia cannot win this. I mean, Ukraine cannot win the war unless United States or other NATO countries get involved. But they could have just negotiated from the beginning and not had the war. I mean, let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll keep it rolling.
For democracy.
It is the fight for democracy, and this is not the fight what is happening now in Ukraine. This is not the fight of one country against other country. We have to stop Vladimir Putin and Russia in Ukraine. Otherwise, there will be continuation of this aggression.
The US has a lot invested in this tense standoff. 100,000 American troops are stationed in Europe, preparing for a shift in posture. This week, leaders, including President Biden, meeting in the Spanish capital, will update NATO's strategy. Called the strategic concept, the last one described Russia as a potential partner. This time it will say explicitly, Russia is a threat, an unmistakable message from here in Madrid to Moscow. Moscow claims it's not surprised.
Yeah, like, I mean, I just think, like, what are we doing? The global economy is going down because of this war, or that's what we're being told. We're being told we're paying more for everything because of this war. So why is this war happening then? Why not just concede parts of your country? That's the way it's always been, has it not? It's always been the violence take by force, but just negotiate. I think in 2022, it doesn't make sense that we're still fighting wars when we have so much knowledge now. We're so globally interconnected now. Our economies rely on one another. It doesn't make sense. European NATO countries need Russia for energy and natural gas, I want to say, and oil. So why not just negotiate?
This month, NATO will meet in Madrid, and it will publish its new strategic concept.
Yes.
The first in a decade.
Naming Russia a direct threat.
This was the Kremlin spokesman speaking to me last week, repeating Russia's accusation that NATO has always been an offensive, not defensive organization.
It was tailored as a gun.
It's a message the Kremlin is telling the Russian people every day. This government-funded Moscow exhibition is called NATO Catalogue of Cruelty.
NATO, from the day of its formation to present day, constantly shows kind of duplicity, like kind of major difference between its peaceful rhetoric and actual policy.
Every NATO controversy is on display. President Putin's early interest in Russia joining NATO is brushed over. The exhibition ends on Ukraine.
Here we have anti-tank missile containers made in UK.
And I just think it's crazy, like in America, I talked about this last night, how we don't have things that we need over here. Infrastructure is terrible. We have bridges that are collapsing. We have high rent prices. It's inflation is at a 40-year high. We don't have enough for America to sustain itself, but we have billions of dollars to spend for this war. Like, we should be making better choices. Our political leaders should be making better choices for Americans.
For years now, NATO has been providing Ukrainian military with weapons, equipment, means of communication, and basically nurturing and pumping Ukrainian military machine.
This exhibition looks like a justification for Russia's actions in Ukraine in the past few months.
Maybe it looks like it, but what we are trying to do here, what we are trying to I don't want to say to make people do, but what we're trying to guide people into is that people think with their own heads.
NATO and Russia sizing each other up in ways not seen for a generation. Both sides saying it has no other option.
And with that, Keir joins top.
Yeah, and like the little people, the regular people are caught in the middle, while like, you know, it's kind of like those games that you can play on your computer. When I was younger, it was the little army, you know, little green men. Now you can play these strategic games where you have all these people fighting the wars and all that stuff. Like, that's literally what's still happening. And I'm like, why? Why is that still happening? I understand having a military for defensive reasons, but fighting wars that you can't win, and while government contractors in the United States are lining their pockets with all the money, and we also are indebting Ukraine. Like, Ukraine's going to be in debt from all this military aid that they're getting. Hopefully my Wi-Fi's, I see the little symbol up here. Hopefully it's still good. But yeah, like, when we think about it, we're not doing anything that's sustainable, even with Ukraine. So why are we doing it?
Tonight from Madrid, where the president has landed today. So, Keir, some major news tonight that we mentioned earlier, the idea to expand NATO by admitting Sweden and Finland a go. What more can you tell us about that?
Hey, Tom, that's right. Well, this was billed as the most important NATO meeting for a generation. And boy, on day one, it is living up to that billing. Turkey persuaded in a bunch of deal making to accept Sweden and Finland joining the alliance. There was a conversation between President Biden and President Erdogan of Turkey earlier this week. Maybe that played a part. Tom, you know, there will be criticism of that deal making in the days ahead. But golly, NATO looks powerful and united tonight. It's not so long ago that President Trump described NATO as obsolete, that President Macron called NATO brain dead. No one is talking like that tonight, Tom.
Okay, but here we do have to ask you, even though the members are now all agreed when it comes to expansion, there's still a number of issues that threaten the unity, though, correct?
That is so right. It's a great question. Just think about President Biden's challenges at home with his favorability ratings, with the midterms looming. Then add to that political paralysis in France. We don't know whether the Prime Minister of Britain will be the Prime Minister in the months ahead. In Germany, the Chancellor has really struggled with the Ukraine crisis. So we don't know whether the major countries of NATO will still be led by the same people in the years to come. And there are leaders here, Tom, who are quietly saying we should keep lines of communication open with Moscow. We should be careful not to encourage Moscow to escalate further, because everybody agrees again.
Right, because that would not be good for anyone.
That what we are seeing here is a generational change. This is a change to the posture towards Russia that is likely to last years, possibly decades, many leaders here say, Tom.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel.
Yeah, I just think that, like, what are we doing? What else it happened today that just had me thinking, what are we doing? Okay, the comedian, independent media guy, Jimmy Dore. He's interesting to watch.
If you shop on Amazon, you should.
Here we go.
This article appeared in the New York Times, and it made quite a buzz. It says Commando Network coordinates flow of weapons in Ukraine, officials say. A secretive operation involving U.S. Special Operation Forces hints at the scale of the effort to assist Ukraine's still outgunned military. And it was written by three people. It would take three people to write this article. From 2015 to early this year, American Special Forces and National Guard instructors trained more than 27,000 Ukrainian soldiers at the Yavoriv Combat Training Center in Western Ukraine, near the city of Lviv. Pentagon officials have said. Military advisors from about a dozen allied countries also trained thousands of Ukrainian military personnel in Ukraine over the past several years.
Okay, so I have a conspiracy. I really believe that all of the world leaders work together. They're all part of the secret societies. They're Freemasons. I talked about this on last night's stream, and where you can find these things in a book, Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. He was a 33rd degree Mason of the Scottish Rite. And I think that if you haven't, looked into the cliff notes of that book, you definitely should. But the reason why I think this, because, it sounds like they were training up for war. Now, we know countries always train up for war and they have exercises and stuff, but to train up for a war, or to be having a war that you can't win, is kind of, at this time, right after a pandemic.
But even as the Biden administration has declared.
Oh, and then also when Putin was placing the Russian army for over a month, stacking them up on the border, and we knew, I just don't see any evidence from American politicians that Putin, that America or NATO ever tried to negotiate. If you've seen that, please let me know in the comments or send me that information, because I have not found where NATO or the US tried to negotiate with Putin. I hear government officials, media say, we can't negotiate, Putin's insane and you can't negotiate with him, but I don't see any evidence of negotiations ever taking place.
Declared it will not deploy American troops to Ukraine. Some CIA personnel have continued to operate in the country secretly, mostly in the capital, Kiev, directing much of the vast amounts of intelligence that the United States is sharing with Ukraine forces, according to a current and former official. The former Trump administration official said Special Operations Command has small groups of American operators working in the field with Ukrainian officials before the war. The American teams were sometimes called Jedber, a reference to a World War II effort to train partisans behind enemy lines.
Interesting.
The modern special operations teams mainly focused on training in small unit tactics, but also worked on communications, battlefield medicine, reconnaissance, and other skills requested by Ukrainian forces. Shortly after Russia invaded Ukraine in February, the Army's 10th Special Forces Group, which before the war had been training Ukrainian commandos at a base in the country's west, they quietly established a coalition planning cell in Germany to coordinate military assistance to Ukrainian commandos and other Ukrainian troops. The cell has now grown to 20 nations. So they have their special ops set up in Germany with 20 other nations' special ops, and they're all special opping the shit out of Ukraine. The cell, which was modeled after a structure used in Afghanistan, is part of a broader set of operational intelligence coordination cells run by the Pentagon's European Command to speed Allied assistance to Ukrainian troops. At Ramstein, I've been there. At Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, I've been there. I had some schnitzel. I did. For example, a U.S. Air Force and Air National Guard team called Grey Wolf provides support, including on tactics and techniques, to the Ukrainian Air Force, a military spokesman said. They have a casino. They have a casino at that Air Force base, at that air base. Oh, you can gamble, put it that way. Anyway, Jackson, now I know you follow this kind of stuff closely. Why was this so significant, you think, that this, because it revealed our deep involvement in Ukraine?
Yeah, I'm going to call it right now. I think I found the single biggest productivity hack.
Interesting. So there's always something else going on.
I've known this for quite some time, and I think you've even put up segments on your show in which Yahoo was reporting on the fact that we were training Ukrainian special ops in the United States.
Okay, if I did that, I forgot.
Battalions of Ukrainian forces, thousands upon tens of thousands of troops, far more than they even admitted to there. But it's the fact that now the New York Times, the quote-unquote paper record, is finally admitting to all of this, and that signifies that the people at the New York Times, Democratic Party officials, are not happy with Joe Biden's course of action with regard to potentially sending more arms there and getting more involved in Ukraine, potentially starting a war over what's going on in Lithuania with Kaliningrad. So there's some people that are opposed to what Joe Biden is doing within the Democratic Party, and they think it's a bad move, and that's why you're seeing this come out in the news.
So what do they think is a bad move? Him ratcheting up war tension, stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. There's a coalition within Joe Biden's administration and also within the...
I felt like war was going to happen. I'm not like an expert on foreign policy or anything, but I felt like war was going to happen because I started noticing that President Biden was bringing back all the old war hawks to work in his administration. And they did report on it around the time, when he was establishing his cabinet. It was interesting because he was bringing back people that, were heavily involved in the times when we were in war.
Pentagon that don't want him to continue focusing on Ukraine. They want him to move away from that. And then there's the pro, faction of everything Ukraine, like William Burns and Victoria Nuland.
So I still don't understand why they're allowing this stuff. Because if you read the rest of that article, it talks about how Joe Biden's ramping up more and more, right? I mean, they're not stopping. They want this war to be long and drawn out, and they're actually trying to find more sanctions to put on Russia, which sounds crazy, but they're doing that.
And those sanctions, I think the crazy part about it is those sanctions are hurting America more than Russia. And I know it was just reported that Russia defaulted on their loan, but I wonder, did they just not pay it because they're like, oh, and the sanctions we put on them, it's interesting, because Europe needs their oil and energy, we didn't sanction Russian oil companies.
Today, Zelensky came out for the first time and said that he wants, his word is as good as nothing, but he's saying that he thinks that this war should wrap up by winter. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens because, again, Russia is the one who is whittling down the Ukrainian army at the moment. But there's definitely people within the New York Times who are getting signals from the upper echelon of the Democratic Party who want Joe Biden to, tamper down his tone with regard to the events in Ukraine.
So that's why it's significant. Okay.
How embarrassing is this, by the way, that they give them all this training and stuff and they're still getting creamed?
Well, we always knew they would get creamed, but you can't build an army in 5 minutes. And we did another story about how they don't even have they don't have radios. So that's like the most essential thing for fighting. From what I understand, again, I'm not in the military, but yes, you definitely
got to have your comms. But I also think too, you can't win a war just by having the best equipment. And equipment can help, but strategy is everything, and also military power and the investment. Russia just has a lot stronger military than Ukraine, so there's that.
Experts I've read have said that if you don't have a radio, you can't really do a war because you have to be able to call and tell them where the enemy is so they can launch missiles to give you cover to go do your thing, and they can't do any of that, which is why a lot of the Ukrainian soldiers are deserting.
Yeah,
and it's happening every day.
Yeah.
And so, you can't, look what we tried to do in Afghanistan. How many trillions of dollars did we throw into Afghanistan trying to get their army ready? There was no army ready. You can't make another country's army ready.
You remember the video of them doing jumping jacks? And they were like, oh my God.
Did they still do the monkey bars? Because that's what the terrorists like to do. They like to do the monkey bars in the desert.
No, those guys were SEAL Team 6 compared to what we were trained in. They couldn't get the idea of it. It was sad to watch. And oh my God, no wonder, if it wasn't a 20-year murder fest, it would be a lot funnier.
The last thing I'll say about this story is the New York Times, despite all their faults, and all the, coups that they've cheerleaded on, they do get some important reporting out there, but it's 6, 7, 8 months after the events take place when it's important.
When it won't have an impact.
Exactly. When people forgot about it or there's more pressing concerns.
Like what happened in Syria. They were the ones who got the truth out there. It was their reporting that got the truth out about that giant airstrike, which killed hundreds of civilians. But nothing happened. The Pentagon investigated themselves and said they did nothing wrong.
So there you are.
Yeah, I just find it interesting when I think about, this war, and we're inching closer to war, and we have people, the war hawks are saying, oh, this war is going to last a very long time and we have to be prepared for it to last longer. And then meanwhile, there's Joe Biden said there's going to be another pandemic. And now they're rolling out a bunch of monkeypox vaccines. I just think, oh, something else that happened today. We'll keep it rolling. Ghislaine Maxwell, she got 20 years.
So fat. Brendan, you're not fat.
For working with Epstein to sex traffic young girls.
In a criminal proceeding like this.
Here we go.
Following breaking news, Ghislaine Maxwell will serve 20 years in prison for sex trafficking. A federal judge announcing that sentence within the last hour. Now, Maxwell was...
Do you think 20 years is enough? Or do you think she should be in jail longer? I think she's about 60 something right now. So that'll put her about 80 if she serves 20 years. You know what I mean? Do you think 20 years is enough?
Convicted of helping to recruit young girls to be abused by her longtime associate, Jeffrey Epstein, back in December. The judge saying, quote, the damage done to these girls was incalculable. NBC News correspondent for investigations, Tom Winter, has been...
it was underage girls. Is 20 years enough? I don't know.
Following this case from the start, he is live outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan today. Tom, Maxwell did speak in the courtroom before learning her sentence today. What did she say?
Yeah, and a tough sentence that it was, with the judge going above the guideline range to sentence her to 20 years in jail, more than was initially called for, in hitting her with maximum fines. The statements from Maxwell today, as you said, really the first time that we've heard from her in a substantial fashion since this entire case began, which is not entirely surprising. But what she said did surprise some people in court. She did acknowledge the tremendous emotional testimony that these women provided to the court today for all the abuses that they've gone through and all the abuse that they say they've suffered since. Talking about psychological abuse, talking about substance abuse, talking about multiple attempts at suicide, because the things that Maxwell and Epstein put them through. For, in her own words, Maxwell saying today, it is my sincerest wish to all those in this courtroom that this day brings a terrible chapter to an end. She also say, may this day help you travel.
I can celebrate that for the victims,
The darkness into the light, speaking to the victims. She acknowledged that she'd been convicted with Jeffrey Epstein, but didn't really admit her own role in what happened here and her own role with Epstein. That's something that the judge picked up. She said it was kind of a pattern of putting the blame aside. Noted that in handing down her sentence. Maxwell, for her part, stood to receive the sentence as is customary, but pretty much just looked forward and didn't seem to have any sort of overt emotion or reaction to today's proceedings. And I will note, during the course of the victim's testimony, she also did not appear to ever look at them, just kind of lean forward and look forward. And
that's interesting. That's a psychological thing. So she don't have to accept responsibility. So not only did the judge notice that she didn't accept responsibility with words, but indeed by not looking at the victims, it's another way of, not accepting that responsibility from a psychological and spiritual perspective.
Some notes as well. This really does mark the final chapter of a multi-year investigation. She was first arrested nearly 2 years ago in seclusion at a home in New Hampshire, where she was at the time trying to cover up her phones in tinfoil. To give you an example of what happened that day, according to the FBI, and now nearly 2 years later, she'll spend the next 2 decades in jail.
And Tom, we often hear...
I don't think she's going to do 20 years. Do y'all think she's going to do 20 years? I don't know.
Victim impact statements at this point in a criminal proceeding like this. What did we hear from the victims? What did they have to say to Maxwell today?
Well, it's some very powerful comments. All told, we heard from 4 of them in person. We also heard from an attorney representing Virginia Joffrey Roberts, who wanted to speak on her behalf because Joffrey couldn't make it today. We heard from her outside of court. Let's listen to Sigrid McCauley.
Today showed us that individuals can be held accountable irrespective of power and privilege. And today showed us that the chorus of voices of these survivors prevailed and showed accountability. It's really a victorious day for justice.
Aaron, the key message here today, both inside the court and outside the court, is this idea that all of these young women had family difficulties, may have had financial difficulties, and they were sought out by Maxwell and by Epstein to.
So they were preyed upon based on their economic status and who they were. Wow, they knew how to pick them.
Traffic them, to abuse them, and to take advantage of them, even threatening them at different points. It was a emotional hour or so inside federal court.
All right.
And based on the amount of young underage women it was, I think, I don't know if 20 years is enough.
Tom Winter for us outside the federal courthouse here in New York. Tom, thank you. Confusion in Texas after the Supreme Court.
Thanks for watching our.
What else happened today? Are there any other stories? My viewer on Twitch, are there any other stories that happened today that we should look up or we should talk about? I also think, oh, this is a follow-up from, another Jimmy Dore video. This is a follow-up on how the Democrats.
If you voted for Barack Obama because he said this.
Well, the first thing I do as president is sign the Freedom of Choice Act.
See, this has been going on for a long time. And it's interesting. I did see that Democrats got called out for fundraising right after Roe v. the SCOTUS overturning Roe v. Wade. Like, it could have been signed into law a long time ago if that's what Democrats wanted to do, but they didn't. So to now have like a fake outrage or act like you got to vote for Democrats so they can come in and undo it. That's the same kind of fear-based tactics that the Republicans use. Vote for us, because if you don't, your freedoms are going to be taken away. The Democrats are going to take the Second Amendment away. It's interesting how they all play the same game the same way, and people keep falling for it, and people keep blaming someone else. Like, oh, it's because you voted for a Democrat and put them in office. And I already broke down the Electoral College and all that stuff yesterday, so I will not be repeating myself in this one, but we'll just keep rolling with the video.
That's the
and if you believed him, turns out you were a sucker, because as soon as he got it.
Now, the Freedom of Choice Act is not my highest legislative priority.
Bam!
Psych.
See?
Or maybe you voted for Joe Biden because he said,
I would send immediately to the desk of the United States Congress when I'm elected president, if I'm elected president, a codification of Roe v. Wade amended by Casey.
You see how they just lie? They just lie.
And of course, we all know he didn't do that. Well, Jimmy, what is codification anyway? So if you voted for either of those two guys, or you voted Democrat because you cared about abortion, you're a chump and a sucker. And who makes you a chump and a sucker? Not me. Joe Biden and Barack Obama made you a chump and a sucker. Not me.
But also, if we're going to talk about who lied, the Supreme Court justices who were nominated, Amy Coney Barrett, Gorsuch, and I think also Kavanaugh, were asked about overturning Roe v. Wade, and they all lied about it. They all lied as well. So just to point that out.
Barack Obama. And so what
they lied by saying they wouldn't overturn it.
Codification. The legislation would use federal authority to invalidate anti-abortion state laws. So it makes clear no state government shall enact or enforce any law, rule, regulation, standard, or other provision having the force and effect of law that conflicts with any provision of this act. So if Joe Biden and Barack Obama would have signed that act,
then the state wouldn't have been able to put any law. Federal law would supersede state law.
States could not now pass a law to restrict abortion, because that would be codified in federal law. Federal law supersedes state law.
Yep.
That's why.
Yep.
That's what codification means. Okay. So now we have Kamala Harris tweets out, I know there are women out there who are afraid. To those of you who feel alone and scared, I want you to know the president and I are fighting for you and your rights. We are in this fight together, except...
Isn't it interesting? Like, I have noticed that politicians lately are, Democrats and Republicans, are talking about how Americans are feeling a lot. They're talking about people's feelings a lot. And they're doing it, and I feel like it's in a disrespectful way. Oh, Americans are feeling pain at the pump. Like they're feeling pain when it comes to their finances. That's not pain. Like, do something about it. If you're talking about just a feeling, I feel like it minimizes the reality of what's happening for every American if you're just talking about feelings.
He's not fighting. Biden says the right to choose is fundamental, but is not prepared to call for a change to the filibuster to protect those rights. So those fundamental rights have to go because I really like the filibuster. I got to think for it. Is the filibuster a right? No. What about the right to privacy? That's a fundamental right. But why do you want to keep the thing that's not a right and you have to get rid of the thing that's fundamental? Because I'm a bullshitter. And people will vote. Because if I actually codified it into law, then people would stop voting for Democrats. Because then what would they get them to vote for? We don't do shit for them.
That's a good point.
If you love playing classic all-time...
That's a good point. It's all about re-election and being able to, have more fake promises.
When Obama took office, we had big majorities in the House and Senate. They could have codified Roe versus Wade, banned assault rifles, codified voting rights, and the whole list. They chose to keep the filibuster, requiring Democrats to get permission from Republicans.
So when I look at it, so this right here, these are all the things that Democrats consistently run on. And I bet we could find a list where the Republicans run on exactly these same things. Right on the opposite side. And then we wonder why our country doesn't get anything done and we can't move forward.
To do literally anything. And then Caitlin Johnson has the right response. What's the correct response when a mainstream political party keeps communicating that they'll never do anything to help you, but you need to support them anyway, or they'll let their friends in the other mainstream political party take away your rights? What's the correct response? The correct response is to stop voting for them and stop donating to them.
Yeah.
Now, people like Kyle Kalinske will say we're nihilists. People like Kyle and Rachel, what's her name? Crystal, will say we're nihilists. We're telling you that. But those are what they are is called sheepdogs. They're sheepdogging you into a anti-worker, pro-Wall Street, pro-war party. And how do you fight that? You stop donating to Democrats and you stop voting for Democrats and Republicans.
Agreed.
And Republicans. That's
it. Definitely is time for another party, some way, shape, or form, in a way where I know they say, "Oh, third party is a wasted vote," but in a way where there's people who truly advocate for the people. Who's doing that? What party is doing that?
We have to do. But these I don't know. They're not going to stop. Look what this guy's. I don't want to save that for the next.
Okay.
Here it is. Nancy Pelosi says Democrats' focus on abortion access is hurting the party. When did she say that? She said that in 2017. She said that when Trump was president. Here's another one. As Democratic Party leadership condemns the Supreme Court ruling, a reminder that Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and Jim Clyburn are all endorsing anti-choice Henry Cuellar in his primary against Cisneros, and Clyburn is doing a campaign rally in San Antonio with Cuellar tomorrow. So they're out there campaigning for anti-abortion Democrats over pro-choice Democrats.
You see?
And the real problem, again, I have to remind people this, is the Democrat. And so if you say, oh, the Supreme Court, that's why you have to vote Democrat. They don't give it. Barack Obama could have appointed Merrick Garland in a recess appointment. He didn't do it on purpose. Why? So you would have to vote.
See, this is because they have their stepping stones to, you know what I mean? Like each person has their stepping stone, and that wasn't part of the plan. So it wasn't part of the plan. So in 2022, Republicans could have conservative justices in the court that could undo and overturn Roe v. Wade. So then the Democrats can run on it and the Republicans can be emboldened by it, but we still keep getting nowhere while not advocating for the people who are born, while not advocating for better funding for education, infrastructure bill. None of that. We're not talking about any of those things anymore. We're just talking about January 6th and Roe v. and the SCOTUS overturning Roe v. Wade. We ain't talking about gas prices no more. We're not talking about American life and how people are being priced out of life in America. Just this.
Vote for Hillary. That's how cynical they are. But guess what? Didn't work. Not enough people voted for Hillary, and Trump won anyway. And what did the Democrats now say about that? The Democrats, Chris King, who worked in the Obama White House for 6 years and played a central role in getting his judicial nominees confirmed, said that there's no question Democrats could have done more to push Garland's nomination through, even if they had limited options in the minority. They didn't do it.
Right. They quit. They just let it happen. They just threw their hands up with everything else, just like Bernie Sanders throwing his hands up, saying he'll support President Biden if he runs again in the next election. Like, why? When he said that President Biden has no progressive policies at all.
Anything. They wanted to use Merrick Garland to get you to vote for Hillary, and it didn't work. So they're the ones, again, let's keep our eye on the powerful. That's what they don't want you to do. They want you to blame your neighbor. But of course, the Democrats could have did this. We should have shut down the Senate. Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii, a Democrat, said, we made a calculation that we were going to win in 2016 and confirm the nominee, and it didn't work. So they thought they were going to have Hillary, and they didn't. So it's that's a guy admitting their failure. That's good to see. A senator, a powerful person, one of the most powerful 50 people in the world. The issue was, frankly, with Merrick Garland himself, because Barack Obama picked a corporatist who nobody was excited about. He was too moderate and too boring for some, and he just didn't excite progressives.
I don't think there's a left anymore. I don't think there's a left in America anymore. I think there's only centrist moderates and the right.
Nobody cared that.
Because people talk left. Bernie might talk left. But when it comes to voting for policies, they don't vote left on any policies.
He wasn't appointing him. They didn't care enough to go rally, fight, and march for it. And that was on purpose. And now the real reason why we got the Supreme Court that we have today, it's because the Democrats rigged their own primary for a candidate who couldn't beat a game show host. You think I'm kidding? Let's remember how they rigged their primary. This is from 2016.
All right, Bernie Sanders' winning streak continued over the weekend with a victory in the Wyoming caucuses on Saturday. Sanders beat Hillary Clinton by 12 points, 56-44, notching his 8th win in the last 9 nominating contests.
Okay, what do we do here?
I mean, it sounds like he's winning.
He's won 8 out of 9.
But he's
here, and look, he wins by 12 points. I tell you, I would not do well as a Democratic politician. He wins by 12 points. He may not even pick up a single delegate. It's 7-6 now, with a remaining delegate to be decided later.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
See?
That's a crushing victory.
I know. And listen, I think that with the super delegates that they have, I think she only has to win 30% of the, you don't have to get 30% of the vote.
See, so it's rigged. It's rigged because I feel like the country would be in a much different place if they allow Bernie Sanders to be the party nominee.
I mean, talk about voters feeling like a system might be rigged. Why are you even voting?
If you're driving a car right now, we've been talking about rigged systems. We're putting up right now a graphic. Bernie Sanders wins 56-44% in Wyoming. The delegates rewarded: Hillary Clinton 11, Bernie Sanders 7. Why does the Democratic Party even have voting booths?
No, why?
This system is so rigged.
See?
So maybe that's why we got Donald Trump as president, because the powerful rigged the primary election for the worst candidate in the history of our country.
Wow.
Nobody was more hated than Hillary Clinton when they ran for president than Hillary Clinton.
Yep. Facts.
And I don't know if you remember this. Why Tim Kaine can oppose abortion and still run with Hillary Clinton. She picked an anti-abortion guy to run with her.
I met Tim Kaine when I was advocating for military mental health benefits. He seemed like a decent guy. So, you know, it looks like my Wi-Fi is not doing very well, and my cats are hungry, and I stayed on here for 4 hours last night, so I'm not gonna do that tonight. But I hope that, you know, if there's anything that we can glean from it, just figure out a way where you can bring more love into the world, because that's really the only thing that matters. All this politics and stuff, like, it's interesting. I'm interested in it because it affects people, but ultimately, we have the illusion of choice here. It's not a democracy; it's a republic. We have an illusion of choice, and what you can do is choose to be a loving person, choose to be kind to your neighbor, and if you call yourself a servant of the Most High, or you call yourself a Christian, that should be your whole aim, is to love the Lord God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself, which is the most important commandments. So thank you for rocking with me on this stream. I'll be back again. I'll try to come back at least for an hour a day and talk about either the things that have gone on during the day. I definitely want to do a video about Kendrick Lamar, who recently performed with a diamond-studded crown of thorns on his head, you know, with the image of being Christ, and then walking on water in his N95 video, but also appearing like the beast coming out of the sea, and then saying he's not your savior, but then imitating the Messiah. And yeah, so I definitely will do a video on Kendrick Lamar within the week, maybe even tomorrow. But thanks for joining Convo Blueprint. I'm your host, Zion, and hope to catch you in the next one. I'm on YouTube and also Twitch. So just catch me on the next one and follow me on YouTube. You can send comments there, and I appreciate you tuning in. Let me know if there's anything that you want me to cover, and catch you on the next one. I'm going to stop saying that. I said that like 5 times. All right. Have a good night, good day, good morning. Peace.